How do you manage that with your autonomous fleet now, right? Somebody gets sick in the car. Do you have like an AI puke detector?
I guess we're going to have to build that. That's going to go into our product roadmap.
Smell-o-vision in the car.
I'm still trying to get my son to get his driver's license.
Do you think that's a leading indicator for Uber success, or is that a lagging indicator of Fortnite success?
I haven't actually looked into whether Fortnite players are Uber users as well. Certainly Uber Eats users.
I'm going to leave that one alone. Thank you for being in person. I love doing these conversations in person in our studio here in New York. It's a different energy, so thank you for coming in.
In person is the new thing.
I have to ask you, did you take an Uber in New York City to our office today?
I did not take an Uber. The reality in my life is I need security and all that stuff. So sometimes I take Uber and then the security vehicle follows me. Today we had a lot of traffic, so I couldn't do it.
There was a lot of traffic today.
Yeah.
I always wonder, like, how often you get to dog food your own products.
You got to dog food your own products. Absolutely.
There's this line. Tim Cook said in an interview recently that he uses every single Apple product every single day, which mathematically seems very challenging. Do you take them all? Do you take Uber X and Uber Black?
Totally. Like you can't do it every single day.
Yeah.
But I use Uber. I use Uber Eats. Actually, one of the really important moves that I made was starting to deliver. Most Uber employees, we use Uber as a consumer, but not as many use Uber as an earner, as a driver or a courier. And I think early on when I joined, we were more building for the rider or the eater than the earner. And so I actually started when I was in San Francisco. It was during COVID. I was going crazy at home. So I got my e-bike and I started delivering food, and then I got a Tesla and I started driving folks around. So I really do think that it's important to dog food. You can't do it every single day because you have a day job, but one, you learn about your product, and just as importantly, it's an example that you're setting for your employees.
When you were driving for Uber and driving people around, was security in the car with you? How does this work?
They were tracking me, and then they were following me to make sure everything was okay.
This is the most intense Uber ride of all time.
It was really cool. And by the way, it's a lot harder than it looks. Yeah. And when I first started driving, I was so nervous. I didn't want to screw up. I didn't want to take the wrong route, et cetera. It's actually a lot more challenging than you think it is.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to talk about today. You have some news from your GoGet announcements. You have ways to use Uber in more consistent ways, which I think is very interesting. There's a partnership with VW to launch autonomous rides in LA next year. That's on top of all your other autonomous partnerships. I'm obviously very interested in that. I want to start with just Uber conceptually right now. Mm-hmm. I think of Uber in the most reductive way possible, and so it goes. But I think of Uber as the app where I open it, I push a button, and anywhere I am in the world, a Toyota Highlander will show up.
Pretty much, or another car, but for you, maybe Toyota Highlander.
It's almost always a Toyota Highlander.
That's awesome. I love it.
And there's a whole lot to that. I don't mean to demean the complexity of that product and the fact that Toyota has to make Camrys and Highlanders at scale, and they have to ship their that's all very complicated. But in the most reductive sense, I think that's how people perceive Uber, right? It's a button that makes a car show up.
I think so, yes.
Is that the foundation of everything else, or are there more foundations?
I mean, ultimately, we want to be your everyday app, kind of your iOS for everyday living. So we started certainly with rideshare, and that was the core of our business. But then we've expanded into other categories, obviously Uber Eats and grocery, et cetera. And to some extent, I think we're building this real-time logistics network. And it started with moving people around. Now we're moving things around, food around, and we're expanding into many, many more categories. But to the consumer, we want to be known as the app that makes kind of your day a little bit easier and helps you go where you want or get anything that you want.
The news today is a bunch of things like route share. There's more ways to use the subscription more consistently, more ways to plan commutes to work. And so that core function, there's a supply of people with cars in the world, and we can aggregate the demand and push the button and the cars will come find you. That's the thing that appears to be changing in your news, right? Where it's not push the button and the car comes to you. It's instead of commuting, we will just manage the logistics of that for you, and you will subscribe to it, and that will be a recurring behavior, a recurring fee. Right. Is that the change here?
Yeah, to some extent, if you think about what we're doing is we're saving you your time, right, with someone else doing the driving instead of you, so you can do whatever you want. Now, there's a trade-off as it relates to reliability or time, and price. Okay, the faster you want your ride or the more reliable you want that ride to be, that can cost us more. The more you can trade off your time, if you say, you know what, I may not need my ride in the next 4 minutes, I can wait 15 minutes, or instead of having the car come all the way to me, I can walk 2 blocks if that makes the network more affordable, or I can save money, then that's a trade-off that you can make. So human beings are always trading off. Essentially, you're paying for your time, so to speak. And with our network, there's always a trade-off between reliability/time and price. So what we're trying to do is find products that allow people to self-identify where they want that trade-off. So for example, for you, really important trip, I'm going to take a flight, okay? I need to absolutely know that my Uber is going to be there. You can pick a reserve, right? You pay a premium for that reserve. The driver shows up early, et cetera. The reliability is like 99+%. So that's one version. Now, the other version is this is for the commuter. This is someone who is going to work every single day, morning, evening, using Uber. The price of your commute every day, it can get up there. So what we wanted to do is allow somebody to trade off a little bit of price or reliability. You may have to, for example, we have one product called Route Match, right? Which is set routes coming every 20 minutes. So there's a predictability there. You will share your ride with up to 2 other people. But you are trading off a little bit. You can't quite get it on demand because there's a schedule there, and you may share it with somebody. You're trading off a little bit of that personal reliability or time in order to get about 50% off. So we're constantly making trade-offs as it relates to our services. And you know, originally when we were thinking about these trade-offs, we thought it's about the demo. You know, there are some people who are less time sensitive and more price sensitive, or the other way around. It turns out that that is true, but there are also occasions, right? So occasion might be travel, where you're going to pay more to be more reliable. And there may be another occasion, which is, hey, on my commute, if I know, 20-minute increments, I can kind of adjust my life to get that 50% off. So it's been a really interesting kind of evolution of the network and how we think about the trade-offs and the efficiencies of the network.
Is convenience on that list of priorities for you? You talked about time and reliability, but it seems like I open the app, it's inexpensive, and it's right there, is as important as all the other stuff.
Yeah, listen, I think your definition of convenience may be different, right? Something that's cheaper may be more convenient for a person. Something that's more timely can be more convenient. So ultimately, I think convenience is an amalgamation of all of that, and it depends on what you consider to be convenient.
One of the reasons I ask that question is I see all the time in various other parts of the tech industry that we cover that consumers will pick convenience over quality almost every time.
Interesting. Yeah.
The example I use, which is not a one-to-one to Uber, is music, where consumers will pick just the worst quality streaming. If it's available, they'll watch bootlegged YouTube videos of the songs they want to hear. They often will not pay for the high quality lossless elsewhere. But you can do price discrimination based on that.
Totally. Now, I challenge you a little bit on that, which is in the early days of music, bootleg music, bootleg movies, et cetera, were the biggest use case. But actually, as streaming made it more convenient, people were willing to pay. So I do think like there's a price convenience trade-off, and it's personal. I think habits change as well, and we are just trying to kind of figure out what's the most optimal price convenience trade-off that we can make to essentially aggregate the most demand and the most supply as well.
Yeah. One of the reasons I ask about convenience is you framed route share walk a little bit to get to the spot is reliability. And to me, that's convenience, right? It's like I'm going to trade a little bit of convenience and maybe pay a lot less.
You can totally go there.
Well, I read this press release announcing route share, and I just had this like very mid-2010s reaction, which is, did Uber just invent a bus? Did you just invent a bus?
Well, listen, I think to some extent it's inspired by the bus, right? And if you step back a little bit, what part of our looking to expand Uber and grow is about making Uber more affordable to more people, right? I think like one of the things that makes tech companies really, really different from most companies out there is our goal is to lower price, right? Because if we lower price, then you can extend audience, et cetera. And there are two ways of lowering price as it relates to rideshare. One is you get more than one person to share a car, right? Because car costs money, driver's time costs money, et cetera. Or you reduce the size of the vehicle or the price of the vehicle. And we're doing that actively, for example, in a lot of countries, two-wheelers and three-wheelers in those countries. So we've been going after this shared concept, which is bus, for many, many years. And we started with XShare, for example, which is kind of on-demand sharing. But this concept takes it to the next level, which is if you schedule and create consistency among routes, then I think we can up the matching quotient, so to speak, and then we can essentially pass the savings on to the consumer. So it is, call it next-gen bus, but the goal is just to reduce prices to the consumer and then help with congestion, help with the environment. That's all good as well.
Congestion is interesting. We're obviously talking in New York City.
Yeah.
We're months into the congestion pricing program here, which was designed to get people out of their cars onto the bus, onto mass transit, even into Ubers and taxis, right? Mm-hmm. Have you seen any statistics since congestion pricing has been in effect here that says Uber usage here has gone up?
Yeah, so Uber usage has gone up, but we don't have the counterfactual, which is would it have gone up if there were no congestion pricing? But what we're seeing is very, very similar to some of the public data out there, which is traffic is flowing faster. And the average speed of an Uber, I think the New York Times said traffic speeds were up like 6 or 7%. Very similar numbers for Uber as well. So Ubers are getting there faster, but I don't have a counterfactual. Was it good or bad for a business? We supported congestion pricing. The way I think about congestion pricing is it's actually taking cars or vehicles that have the lowest utility off the road. Right? It's almost a little bit like surge pricing if you think about it, right? With surge pricing, it's a combination of, hey, during peak times, we want to get more drivers out there. And at the same time, we want to encourage people who may not need to travel during peak times. We actually want to dampen demand and move it to non-peak times as well. So congestion pricing to some extent is, call it city surge, right? They're increasing prices for a certain time and it removes demand from vehicles that have the lowest utilization. It happens that Uber's taxis are very high utility vehicles on the road.
Yeah. You're closing in on a decade as the CEO of Uber. The way you talk about it is very operational, right? You're maximizing the utility of these assets that are on the road, whether your drivers own them. We should talk about the autonomous fleets that seem like they're going to come into existence, and then maximizing utility and value and all this stuff. You obviously took over from a founder who had a much grander vision, which was that no one should own a car and that all transportation should be run by Uber.
Well, that's still a vision.
It's still a vision.
Absolutely.
I'm just wondering, the way you're talking about it, the way you're talking about, route share competing with the bus, is it still the vision to take over from those things? Do you perceive yourself to be in competition with like public transport?
No, actually, I view that we are in competition with personal car ownership. That was Travis's vision as well, right? And so actually public transport is a teammate, right? Which is consistently we see it in cities in which there's significant public transport. Uber does really well because actually it goes to what I was talking about earlier. There are just different use cases, right? So you might take public transport for your downtown commute, but if you're going to dinner with your friends, then you might take an Uber, et cetera. So Uber and public transport, we compete on a particular trip. That's absolutely true. When you decide, well, am I going to take a bus? Am I going to take a subway? Or am I going to take an Uber? But as it relates to your life, we're very much complements. And the big kahuna that we're going after is car ownership. That ultimately is a vision. It remains a vision. It's hard to do because actually the car is really flexible product. with mass manufacturing, really cost effective, et cetera. So it's going to take a lot of work to get there. We're less than 3% of miles traveled on the road, even though we're a very, very big company. We got a long way to go, but the vision definitely hasn't changed.
Are there some markets where you think you've made a bigger dent in car ownership than others?
I don't know if we've made a bigger dent, but there are definitely some markets where our penetration of miles traveled is higher. So, for example, in Latin America, our penetration is very, very high. New York penetration or U.S. big city penetration, where there is mass transit, is higher as well. I haven't looked at whether we've made a dent in ownership.
Yeah. The reason I asked that question is another way to think about it is there's some percentage of people who would have gotten a car but for Uber existing in their life, right? Do you track that? Do you measure that?
We don't track that, but I can tell you my son, and this drives me crazy, he's over 18. Like, I don't know about you. Did you get a license the minute you could drive?
15 and a half.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like it was just such a thing. It was a goal in life. It represented freedom. And I'm still trying to get my son to get his driver's license. But Uber's freed him up. So it absolutely, if you look at the percentage of, I think, 16 or 18-year-olds who are getting their license, that percentage is coming down significantly. It used to be, I think, 2/3. Now it's probably in the 50% range. I could be wrong. So it is absolutely having an effect on car ownership.
Do you think that's a leading indicator for Uber success, or is that a lagging indicator of Fortnite success?
Probably the two are mixed, but I also think it's a indication of the urbanization of our populations as well. But I haven't actually looked into whether heavy Fortnite players are Uber users as well. I suspect they may be. Certainly Uber Eats users.
I'm going to leave that one alone. There's another hour of just like PhD level sociology in that comment alone.
Correlation, causation, who knows?
Let's talk about Uber itself. It's true you took over in 2017.
Yes.
Obviously, you took over a company led by a very strong founder, had a vision of how the company should be run. How is Uber structured at this point? This is a classic Decoder question.
Yeah, sure. So the company is structured in, we have a combination of matrix and line of business structure, which is we have two global leads, one of our mobility business and one of our delivery business. And then most of the other functions, if you look at marketing / PR, government relations, if you look at product, finance, et cetera, are matrixed. And I think it's relatively similar. I would say as the company's matured, we have matrixed the company more, which happens, I think, to a lot of companies that kind of mature and their practices become more predictable, and you're trying to bring kind of a higher degree of expertise into the practices. So it's a combination. And, we constantly have this creative battle between the lines of businesses and the matrices. Ultimately, I think it works.
I mean, that's the tension. The joke I make with everyone is if you tell me the structure of your company, I can tell you 80% of the problems.
Absolutely.
It's not even a secret. I think the listeners know that is the secret of the show, is I can just guess at 80% of the problems if you tell me the structure of the company.
And listen, I think that the conflict is constructive. This is a terrible metaphor, but if you look at pure breeds, they tend to get sick more. Pure breed dogs, they tend to get sick more, like bulldogs that have been bred, year after year after year, versus hybrids that aren't pure breeds. And to some extent, I think that companies that have a structure that's one note, that only are there's an LOB structure or there's a matrix only structure, the lack of conflict sometimes allows the strength or the weakness of either structure to kind of go overboard. Matrix structures usually are associated with maybe more efficiency but slower decision making, right? LOB sometimes are associated with like much faster but difficulty in scaling, et cetera. So I think my directs and some of the teams get frustrated with the conflict. Some of these decisions come up to me, but I think the conflict is actually really healthy. The conflict is what allows us not to fall prey because these two teams are constantly kind of keeping each other in check. If you've got a matrix function, that matrix function may not realize that, let's say, the marketing in Egypt is not quite sharp enough, right? But the Egypt GM that we've got is living and dying by that marketing, right? So the two keep each other in balance. But that Egypt GM might not know what great marketing may be, what an absolutely first-rate marketer is. So that conflict keeps those two in check and ultimately gets a better outcome. Conflict can be unpleasant, but I think, kind of the conflict makes us better.
As a guy who runs a single vertical line of business in a matrix company, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. There's no perfect way. There's no perfect way.
Put that into practice. Obviously, you gave a hypothetical there. What's an example where you have had to mediate that conflict?
I think, marketing is one just since we talked about that, I've had to mediate as it relates to, let's say, the allocation of capital, right? Which is every single line of business and GM is going to want some budget for branding because they're fighting it out on the ground, all right? And then if you look on a global basis, how do I allocate my marketing spend? The answer to the global optimum solution may be different than the answer as to the request of that Egypt GM, right? Those answers during planning, budgeting may be different. So early on, as we were building this matrix structure, there was a lot of conflict. Now, the teams have a real understanding, like they're getting into a rhythm, et cetera, and the conflicts are much further, they get to me much less often. Same thing with product, right? Product prioritization, very, very similar, which is there's a constant push and pull. As a global company, you want to build globalized product that are as similar as possible to each other as you can. At the same time, locally, there are some local competitors that may have some twists and turns of a product that may be only applicable to that market, that may not make sense for you to build on a global basis. That push and pull is a tough push and pull sometimes.
I mean, that when I say 80% of the problems, that's the one I can usually guess at with like 100% accuracy. How do you solve that? Do you have local product teams that are allowed to just make Uber whatever they want?
So one is we have the GMs on the ground really keep the product teams accountable, but our product planning is global by nature. And it is not perfect. Sometimes the GMs that yell the loudest get their way. We want to make sure that our product people kind of travel to the market so they feel the pain of the market, so to speak. But honestly, it's something that we have to keep working on. We don't have it perfect by any means.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a difference there from the sort of founder-led company that is totally functional at the beginning, gobs of VC money coming in. I mean, that's the early Uber, right? Is like we have a bunch of zero interest rate VC money, and we're gonna win by just buying all the drivers in a market, and then setting the prices to zero, and we'll figure it out in the end. And that was totally functional.
I mean,
you've created it in a different structure. I'm just wondering, how did you make that transition?
Well, let me correct you there. It wasn't functional. It was GM led.
Okay. Even back in the day.
Oh, it was the GMs were mini CEOs of every single country. Like Travis would hire GM, parachute them into a market. And you're right, we did go out and buy supply. And really, we are, as a company, a supply-led company, right? Which is first you build liquid supply, then you invest in demand. You have to, in the early days, you essentially have to price under market, and you lose a bunch of money in a market. As liquidity increases and the matches increase and the efficiency of the market increases, you can take out you can start pulling more profits from a marketplace. That was essentially the formula. And it might have seemed crazy at the time, but I think that Travis and the founding team got it right, which is creating liquidity in the marketplace is exactly what allowed you to get to profitability. And whoever created the liquidity of supply and demand fastest was the one who ultimately won. And so in the early days, it was all GMs, spent a ton of money on liquidity. And then when I came in, I started to globalize some of those matrix functions. It took time. It was painful at times, but I think we're at the right balance now.
What's the hardest choice you had to make along that way?
Hardest choice was actually on product, and specifically it was when I was around for a while, our rides business and our eats business were complete verticals. So you had different ops teams, you had different marketing teams, you had different product teams as well. And Eats was competing against pure plays, DoorDash, Just Eats, Deliveroo, et cetera. So as the company was young, and Eats was 10, 15% of the business. So if you decided to matrix that function, for example, your head of product, are they going to spend time on their 85% rides, or are they going to spend time on 15% eats? And no matter how much I say, hey, spend time on eats, they get paid for ride success. So we went a few years with essentially rides and eats totally separate. And then there was a big decision that we made to combine the product teams and the product and tech teams. That's what makes the company go. There's a lot more that happens around it, but if you don't have great product, if you're not strong technically, you're going to suffer. That decision was probably the hardest decision. It came with some bumps and bruises, but I think it was a really, really good decision, because in the end, Eats got big enough for everybody in the company to care about it, right? And once it got past that 15%, and then second, we were late to the game as it related to Eats. We were years behind the other pure play players. So if you ask yourself, why is it that Eats is going to win? The reason was, obviously, we got great talent at the company, but you have to assume your competitors have great talent as well. The answer was a platform, right? Was that Uber as a brand was an everyday use case, and you could actually introduce your audience who's using rides on a daily basis to Eats. We then launch a membership program that worked for both, et cetera. The platform and the fact that we have greater scale than anyone else allows us to invest more and then cross-sell our riders into eaters, now more our eaters into riders, and then drivers too. Encourage them to, move people, but also move things every once in a while.
I want to ask you about cross-selling in the platform in
Yeah,
a very
sure.
specific way, but you've kind of walked right into the other big Decoder question I ask everybody, which is about decisions. You just described a big decision. What's your framework for making decisions?
So I think one is that one framework that I use is, listen, is it a one-way door or a two-way door? Right? That's a classic Amazon. I think Jeff Bezos introduced it. It's a great framework.
One day we're going to make a supercut of people on the show.
Yeah, exactly. He's so many people have been impacted by him, and deservedly so. He's one of the great CEOs of the world. Two-way door, just make the decision. Use your instinct. It's always two-way door. That's easy. That's an example of a one-way door, right? And
merging the product teams.
Merging the product teams. It's like you got to go for it. I can't tell you that there was a perfect construct one way or the other. Like at some point, some of these decisions you have to make based on instinct, and kind of one of the constructs is, what do I have to believe that the outcome of what I'm doing today is going to change? So is there, hey, incrementally, if I keep doing the same thing but I do it an inch and a half better, am I going to get to the promised land? Or is the promised land is that just going to take way too much time? Or is there uncertainty in getting there where I need a shock to the system? And as it relates to Eats, we had in the early days, we did unbelievably well, but there was a point at which we were kind of hitting a ceiling. And it was then where I decided, to get to that next level, we actually need a shock to the system, and we changed our organizational structure. I think, listen, in hindsight, I think it was a really good decision. Actually, not necessarily because of, I'd say, the product side. We still have dedicated rides and eats product leaders, but actually more on the engineering side, on the code base. It allowed our engineers to generalize the code base, to take some of, let's say, our marketplace talent from rides, who was, is second to none, move them over to Eats. Like, I'll give you a little example. It'll take a little while, but I'll give you a quick example of some of these unanticipated benefits. So when you order an Uber ride, we essentially have to scan the market of all the cars out there and where they're going, et cetera. Are they available, not available? And we have to match you to a car, and we've got to price that ride in less than 30 seconds, right? We want the ETA to be 4 or 5 minutes, and so we have very, very little time to make that decision. So the algorithms that are running have to work very, very quickly. They're making tens of millions of predictions per second. Make that match, go. All right, takes certain architecture, takes a bunch of compute. All right, with Eats, we have the average time to make food is like 10, 12 minutes. So your ability to make that match, you have a lot more time to make that match. So at the time, just because we have the time, our recalcing, we had to make all the same calculus, right? It's like courier, where are they? Which courier should I match you? How do I price you? The time with which we had to make the match on the courier side was much longer. So we would recalc the marketplace 2-3 minutes. And with Eats, we essentially make a bid to a courier who can accept the delivery or not. So let's say for a delivery, I've got 3 bids that I can make for the delivery before the food gets cold. My first bid might be $6. My second bid, if they said no, second bid maybe $7. If they said no, I really have to get you the food, third bid might be $10, right? Once we switch the teams over, the Rise team is like, oh, no, we can make this recalc in 15 seconds, right? So now we've got the ability to make 10 bids. So instead of going from 6 to 7 to 10, you go from 6, $6.50, $6.75, $7. And that wasn't, and so the ultimate cost per transaction, so to speak, is lower just because of compute, speed of algorithms, and decision making. I didn't anticipate that when I made the switch. But those kinds of benefits in terms of back-end code, engineering, just scale, were actually the biggest benefits that we've seen.
I understand why that's great for me as a customer. Cost goes down. I understand why it's great for Uber. Margin goes up. Is that good for the courier?
Well, the courier, if the couriers get more business, and for example, our ability to make more bids has allowed us to actually increase the number of batches. So now, close to 50% of the time, the courier is carrying 2 goods, so to speak, and gets tipped twice. So that was a side benefit for the courier as well, which ultimately we think helps earnings.
The way you're describing Uber is as a platform. A lot of the announcements are use us more as a platform. Engage with us more often in your life.
It's a kind of cold platform, but it's an everyday use case, yes.
Well, the reason I ask about this is maybe 60% of the interviews I've done in Decoder this year are people telling me they're going to build AI agents, right? You're just going to talk to the computer and the Toyota camera is going to show up.
AI is a cool thing, yeah.
Everyone is telling me this is going to happen in ways big and small, whether we're building model context protocol applications at the bleeding edge of tech standards, or whether we're just going to click around on your website using a testing tool, which is a real product that exists in this world. And Uber has been clicked around on by these products.
Of course.
Those all disintermediate your platform, right? You have to do the hard work of creating liquidity of supply and making sure the Toyota Camry appears, and they own the customer relationship. Why would you ever participate in this? I've been wondering this. I asked them all this question. They're like, I don't know, the market will figure it out. I'm like, that's you. You're the market. But you're the other side of the market. Would you participate in these?
So I generally, it's a really good question. And by the way, we talk about it all the time. And time will tell as to what the right decision is. I believe in running open platforms. I don't believe in companies that try to fight the course that technology is taking. They always get left behind. I think we should go to where consumers want us to go. And I do think that's all nicey-nicey, right? But at the same time, one of the advantages that we have is we have unique inventory, right? We've got 8.5 million drivers and couriers. We got over 1.2 million merchants out there. And it's very difficult for a company and who has an agent, for example, to disintermediate us and go direct to the almost 10 million pieces of inventory, if you want to be quite impersonal. These are people, these are businesses, et cetera. It's very difficult for them to draw that inventory. So if you have unique inventory, then while you may make your inventory available to these agents, you can charge a toll for that inventory. So I think, the agents, if they bring us more demand and it means more orders for our restaurant partners or it means more rides for our drivers, that's worth something for us as well. And at the same time, because we're becoming more and more an everyday use case, the frequency now of our average user is 6 times a month and it continues to increase, we can create our own local agents as well, right? We know it's your commute time. Why don't we get you a car? Maybe we can actually make a dispatch to the car before you actually push the button to get the car because we can predict that you're going to do it. So I think as it relates to AI and these agents, et cetera, we want to work with these players. I think we come from a place of strength because of the unique inventory and the fragmentation of these markets that we're organizing. And then we're going to build our own agents as well. And I think, that end state, as long as we're thinking about the consumer, we're thinking about our earners and our merchants, I think we'll be okay.
All right. So let's say I start Nilay's model company.
Yes.
Nilay's voice assistant. And I said, I want to get people sandwiches. I want you to be able to say, I need to go to the airport, get me a car, go read my email, figure out when my flight is, schedule a car. Mm-hmm. This is the dream. For
nice.
Some reason,
Not
scheduling
bad.
a car is, we've got to throw giant data centers at this problem. This is what they pitch me. Okay, so I come to you and I say, I want to be able to get cars from Uber. Mm-hmm. What is the percentage toll? What is the extra margin you would have to charge me, dollars and cents, to make it worth it for me to take the customer away from you in that way? Because when the customer opens your app, you get to cross-sell them into Uber One, or say, would you like some food when you arrive? Or all of these other incremental opportunities that you would forego if I take that customer
So
away.
I have a weird philosophy on this, which is initially I charge you $0. Okay? I think that companies sometimes...
Alarm bells just went off at every...
No, listen, it's like people spend so much time trying to figure out what the economics might be when the first thing is, let's try it out. Is it going to be a good experience or not? Is your scheduling actually going to work, or is it going to be off and the driver has to wait for 10 minutes, which is terrible? Let's just figure it out, okay? Then, once you optimize the experience, we can measure, are you an incremental consumer for Uber, or are you totally cannibalistic? If it's cannibalistic, then I'm going to charge a lot of money. I'm going to say, you can't have any money, right? Because basically, you're getting the benefit. You're getting my content. You're not bringing me any business at all. If it is incremental, then I would pay some take rate. Is it a 5% take rate, 10% take rate, 20% take rate? Depends on the incrementality. But I think so much of innovation is slowed down because companies try to figure out the economics first figure out the experience. And then the economics, they always, listen, if I do a bad deal for a year, who cares? I'm going to renegotiate with you, right? So, and I'm building stuff for the next 10 years. It's success or failure isn't going to be determined, is my take rate 5% or 20% in year one. Now, it can set a precedent, and precedents are dangerous. So that's why I would say, let's charge $0. Let's try it out. Let's see what the experience is. Let's try to measure out what the value add is. And then the economics essentially will take care of themselves.
You said you're having these conversations a lot internally at Uber. What is the shape of those conversations? Are there partners you're excited to work with? Are there agents you've seen that are promising?
We're working with a number of players. I'd say OpenAI is probably the top player that we're working with as it relates to agents. It's imperfect. It's really early. The volume is tiny right now. And the work is just make the experience really, really great. It's way too early for me to tell you, is it going to work or not? I mean, eventually it will. But I don't know the shape right now, so I want to experiment.
When you think about that particular future, everybody wants this product, right?
Yeah.
Again, 60% of my conversations, people just dreaming of a future where you talk to the robots and the robots go do stuff for you. Great.
Not a bad future.
That implies a lot of things from the very beginning. It implies that Uber exists to even just have an API for you to go ask for a car from.
Mm-hmm.
at the base layer of that, I keep joking, it implies that Toyota exists and that there are literally vehicles with a service and support and maintenance network around the world that is effectively standardized, right? Like just the Toyota Camry is an atomic unit of transportation in the entire world. And that's an amazing thing that you depend on to say, okay, you can talk to the robot and the car will show up. There's another change happening here that I think is fascinating, which is the move to autonomous vehicles and fleet operators for those vehicles.
Yes.
You are a participant in that. You have, I think it's Atlanta and Austin with Waymo. Part of your announcement here is VW is going to launch in Los Angeles with you guys next year. That's going to change the dynamics completely of those cars, right? You don't have independent contractors with the atomic unit of the Toyota Camry where you don't even really have to worry about it. You're like, where do we get wheels for a Toyota Camry? It's just not a problem that Uber has to solve. Cars start driving themselves. Suddenly, a lot of people have to worry about different things.
Yes.
How do you think that's going to change while the agents are coming for you?
Oh my God, now you've added agents to the mix.
Well, because at the end of the day, I think what you really want to do is say, I need a car, and then there's just a network of autonomous vehicles waiting to accept bids.
So I don't know. I think you're correlating two things that I would separate, right? Like I was trained as an engineer, and you want to separate and simplify the two problems. They may interact in certain ways. Now, on agents, we talked about, right, which is if I bring value in terms of creating inventory for that agent, I'm creating value. The value is going to be determined based on whether that demand for the agent is incremental or not. If it's not incremental, the value is really small, which means the content provider should get the vast majority of the economics. If it is incremental, then we'll talk about the value of that incrementality. Now, when you look at autonomous vehicles, you're essentially replacing the driver with a machine. Now, our drivers, everyday drivers, not only drive. Now, that's their main job, but they usually own the car. They refuel the car, clean the car, et cetera. So you have to replace kind of that work set. First is the software layer. And obviously the Waymos are working on that, VWs, Wave, like tons of different companies, Pony, WeRide are working on that. And we want to work with all the software providers, make sure they're safe, et cetera, affordable, and bring them to market. Second is the car itself. The car can't just be a good old-fashioned car, right? It has to be a supercar, right? It's wheels, et cetera, but sensor kit. It needs much, much more compute to work. And the cost of that hardware right now is inordinately expensive, but after a couple of generations, it will come down. And then you have fleet management, which we just talked about, which is cleaning cars, et cetera. And then you'll have fleet ownership as well. The manager may own the car, or ultimately, I actually think you're going to have car ownership by, the Blackstones of the world. Like right now, Marriott doesn't own any of its hotels. There are these entities, REITs, that own the hotels. There'll be fleets, right? These financial companies, retirement companies, pension funds that own big fleets of cars. And our job is going to be to bring demand to these really expensive cars. In the early days, because these AVs are so expensive, you're not going to have that many of them on the road. So there will be kind of a hybrid model, right? Like we have in Austin right now. If a Waymo happens to be close to you, we'll hail a Waymo. If the Waymo is 10 minutes away and there are a bunch of drivers who are really, really close, we'll get your driver. The percentage of AVs over a period of time is going to increase. And our job is going to be to kind of manage that shift smoothly and then to make sure that the utilization of whether it's a Waymo or VW, et cetera, is really high. And right now what we're seeing in Austin is that the average Waymo is 99% more productive in terms of trips per day than the average driver in Austin. So we can really, really drive utilization. Ultimately, if that demand for that Waymo comes through the Uber app the old-fashioned way, comes through an Uber agent, or comes through an OpenAI agent or another agent, I don't think really matters in terms of the autonomous transition. That's going to happen separately. We want to manage it. And then where demand comes from, whether agent, app, something that we haven't imagined, Facebook Glass, that's a separate issue. So we just have to manage both transitions. I don't think the two are really going to conflict with each other.
Let me try to make them conflict.
All right, I like it.
You have some big partners. I think a lot of people assumed Waymo would be a competitor, but you found ways to partner with them.
I think, listen, they're a competitor and they're a partner, right? So in some ways, I'll give you the example. Sorry, I know it's a different thing. Domino's. They're a competitor to Uber Eats because sometimes people go directly to Domino's app, and they're a partner at the same time. So I think like people look for the drama. Are you with me or are you against me? The fact is that, co-opetition, whatever you want to call it, they work with us. Waymo's going to work with us in certain circumstances, and they're going to be looking to bring customers direct in other circumstances.
Right, because you control a whole bunch of demand for their product, right?
Yes.
The one competitor that I don't see making as pragmatic a decision as that is Tesla, which is weeks away from its robotaxi event. The way that has been described, and we will see how it actually exists, but the way it has been described is we're going to take everyone's individually owned Teslas, flip on some software, and while you're sleeping, they're going to go off and drive at night. I have a lot of questions about that, just as a general idea about where the demand in the middle of the night comes from, but so goes. But that's a system where you suddenly increase a bunch of inventory of autonomous cars that are just like floating around the city. And you can get demand by just saying, I need a car. And then you have an individual unit of supply that's like, here I am. And you can build an entirely other system that does not require paying you a transaction fee. That does feel like you can combine these two ideas at the same time, because the individual operator of the Tesla robotaxi might have a different approach. How do you reconcile that? Do you think Tesla is going to make that work? Do you think that all those people are going to end up turning over their houses to Airbnb management companies like Airbnb owners do?
I think it remains to be seen. We have to take anything that Tesla does seriously. Elon's an unbelievable entrepreneur. He's built so many companies. My thinking is that individual owner of the Tesla is going to get a subset of demand if that demand can only come from Tesla. Then he or she could get from Tesla demand plus Uber demand, right? So 10 years from now, every single Toyota comes with self-driving software, right? I mean, that I think is relatively likely. You can buy a Toyota and you can, when you're asleep, put that Toyota on Uber that has unbelievable amounts of demand and make, X dollars per day. Or you can buy Tesla and put on the Tesla app, which I think is going to have less demand. I think ultimately the better answer is if you're looking out for the owner and you want to allow the owner to monetize as much as possible, that owner is going to look for the most demand, which is going to drive you to actually multi-source. This is why, listen, Domino's 5 years ago on their earnings calls were saying, I'm never going to use third-party apps. And they are now, because ultimately it's a box, it's a restaurant, and you want to monetize that restaurant as best you can, and having multiple platforms feeding that restaurant, so to speak, is mathematically the best way. So I'm hoping that eventually Tesla decides, hey, I can build my direct channel, but I can also work for Uber. That's ultimately best for Tesla owners.
Have you talked to Tesla about collaborating in any way?
We talk to them all the time. I think there are 150,000 Teslas on the network. We'd love to collaborate with them, and if they want to take us up on that, we're game.
Do you think they can actually pull off the robotaxi fleet as they've described it?
I don't know. I mean, you need, I think, from my standpoint, and this is a judgment, you really need superhuman safety. Superhuman to me doesn't mean better than a human. It means 5x better than a human. Waymo, for example, I think data suggests that they're around that level. And it's not 100% clear to me whether camera only can get there. Most of the players who are building this technology from the ground up are going with camera and LiDAR to have redundancy as it relates to perception. If Tesla can do it, more power to them. We'll see. I think time will tell.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I think about is the thing I already mentioned, which is I know what kind of riders exist in the middle of the night. I was one of those riders in my 20s, and it just seems like there's going to be an awful lot of puke and an awful lot of Teslas.
There's a lot that drivers do that we take for granted. There's a lot of work.
So, I mean, how do you manage that with your autonomous fleet now, right? Somebody gets sick in the car, somebody makes a mess in the car. You don't know it until the next rider shows up.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that you have to handle, which is a rider complaint, or you might have cameras inside the car, for example. The newer cars have that.
Do you have like an AI puke detector?
I guess we're going to have to build that. That's going to go into our product roadmap.
Smell-o-vision in the car to make sure.
That was an interesting one. But that essentially is going to be the job of the fleet operator.
How does that cut work with the fleet operator? So, I took an Uber to work today.
Yeah.
I figured I should use your app before I talk to you. I asked the driver, and he said, I want my rates to go up. That was maybe every driver I ever talked to.
Everyone wants to make more money. Absolutely.
That's the driver's perspective. I'm curious how you're going to make the rates go up as you have big fleet operators who now have giant fixed costs, who are happy to have 24/7 utilization and maybe take a lower rate for greater use, while the drivers still just want high rates. How do you square that circle? Because it feels like the driver rates are going to get pushed down as autonomy comes into the mix.
So I think that our job is going to be to manage the balance between demand and supply. So I think autonomous is actually going to drive more demand, so that, even though as a percentage of our overall inventory, autonomous is going to be an ever-increasing percentage, the overall demand, kind of the number of drivers that we need on our network over the next 5 to 10 years is going to increase because demand increases more, so to speak. 20 years from now, you might be right. And from that standpoint, we just have to manage our inventory, which is there's a turnover of drivers all the time. And we want to make sure that we give drivers the right expectations of earnings, et cetera. And in a city where demand isn't growing, maybe because autonomous supply is coming in, we just have to slow down recruiting of drivers and not make them promises as it relates to earnings. So I think communication, being straight with people, that's the ultimate answer. But I don't take it for granted. This is going to be a transition that we have to manage very, very carefully and make sure that our driver base is taken care of.
What do you think the deals with the fleet operators will look like? Maybe the entire thesis of the Verge is adding computers to things makes them very complicated.
Yeah.
And we should pay attention to that complexity. I'll use the Toyota Camry again, but the Honda Accord, the Chevy Malibu my parents had when I was in the 80s when I was a kid, you didn't have to update the software, right? They didn't have buffer overflows, and the infotainment stack did not restart in the middle of the day. They might have cranky mechanical issues, but again, the sort of ecosystem of being able to fix that very quickly. You get a flat tire in New York, you can just push the car around the corner and there's a taxi garage waiting for you. That's incredible.
Yeah.
You got a bunch of software. You got a bunch of cars that have tons and tons of software at the bleeding edge of technology. You got cameras that can get dirty or broken or whatever. That's a different set of costs on top of the existing mechanical costs.
Totally.
You're not going to repair the robotic cars. The fleet managers are going to.
The fleet managers going to. So we actually work with fleet managers today.
Yeah.
And the reason is a bunch of drivers can't afford vehicles or can't get loans for vehicles. Companies can. And also, we're actively trying to electrify our vehicle base. Close to 10% of our vehicles are now electric, more than 20% in certain cities in Europe, et cetera. So we have experience with fleet operators. About 15% of our volume comes from fleet operators. Many of those fleet operators own the cars. Not all fleet operators own the cars. So I think if they own the cars, then it's just a return on invested capital that they're looking for. And the return is going to depend on the risk.
Yeah.
And the more volume we bring them, so to speak, then the cheaper the cars are going to be because the utilization is going to be really, really high. And then there are going to be some pure play fleet operators where I said the financial players are going to own the cars. That's going to look more like cost plus.
Yeah.
So if it costs you, $10 to operate the fleet, we'll pay you $11 or $12. Our philosophy right now, it goes to earlier what I said, make the damn thing work, make it safe, and then worry about the economics. Right now, for us, AV loses money. But we know in the future it's going to be huge. It's going to ultimately bring the cost of our service down. It's going to make the streets safer. And for us now, it's about making the system work. And then I think the economics are going to fall into place. But I think fleet operations will be a part of the ecosystem and won't be the majority of the ecosystem. What we will bring to these autonomous players is a kind of end-to-end solution. So they have to work on kind of what they're really good at, which is self-driving algos, et cetera. Leave the rest up to us.
But it's that middle part that I'm just focused on.
Well, listen, we work with these fleet operators. And for example, with Waymo in Austin, one of our fleet partners is operating that fleet
Yeah.
right now. So that is certain players may want to do the fleet operation themselves, but I think that our kind of local on-the-ground expertise and the fact that we are running fleets with millions of cars today will allow us, that will be another benefit. Like, I don't know if VW in LA is going to want to operate their own fleet. Mm-hmm. We will be able to bring that capability. If they want to do it themselves, that's totally fine as well.
Yeah, I think I'm just stuck on, man, the fleet operators are going to have a bunch of like really highly paid IT people sitting around rebooting the fiber optic networks of these cars. Like,
if it's just a reboot, that'll be easy. But yes, it is, again, these are complex vehicles. The cost of the vehicles is really high right now. And the care for those vehicles is going to be non-zero.
When you think about the safety side, you've talked about it several times now. The question of just autonomous liability exists in the world.
Yeah,
I book a Waymo through Uber. The Waymo gets in an accident. Who accepts that liability today?
So right now, we think early on, most of the self-driving companies will self-insure. They're big companies. They can afford to self-insure. But ultimately, whether they insure, we insure, or the owners insure, like, it'll work itself out. I do think that autonomy...
What is the mechanism for working it out?
Looking at the incident rate and looking at the cost per incident, right? So I think incident rates are going to come way down, especially if these autonomous vehicles are superhuman safe. Cost per incident is going to go up, right? Which is the cars are much more expensive, et cetera. But I think that the overall cost of insurance as a percentage of your ride is going to come way down because of the safety of these cars.
Yeah. We're out of time here. I got to ask you the last question, just in honor of my Uber driver today. If you had to tell Uber drivers today, here's how I will make you make more money, what would you say?
I would say we're going to bring you more rides. And the income for Uber drivers, for example, in New York, they're making more than $50 per utilized hour. New York is an expensive place, but we think that's a pretty good trade-off with a job that brings lots and lots of flexibility. But it's a hard job, traffic is tough, et cetera. So we'll keep working on it. Ultimately, the way to offer more earnings to drivers is bring more demand, and every single day we're working on that.
Yeah. Dara, this is great. Thank you so much for being on Decoder.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
That's great. I'd like to thank Dara for taking the time to join Decoder, and thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like Decoder, please share it with your friends and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time.